Frankelda!
I am Frankelda. It's not every day that Netflix adds an international independent animated feature to their collection, but when they do, that means they believe that they got something special that's worth displaying on their platform. Now, some animation fans may find Frankelda to be familiar. That's because this isn't her first time haunting a streaming service. Back in 2021, she made her debut on HBO Max with Frankelda's Book of Spooks, and at the time, it managed to get its own fan base that celebrated how it brought some extra macabre onto animation. Kind of like a Mexican stop-motion Tales from the Crypt. But soon afterwards, her creators, Roy and Arturo Ambriz, got bigger plans for the ghostly writer's next chapter. One that turned out to be even bigger than the project's initial idea. What originally started as a half-hour special, it grew into a historical moment by becoming the first ever stop-motion animated feature fully produced in Mexico. And before its premiere on Netflix, the only ways you could go and experience it during its run in 2025 were either through its theatrical release in its native country back in October, or at festivals like the ones for Guadalajara, Annecy, and Fantasia in Montreal, Canada. Which I'll say now that I was fortunate enough to go to the latter. So yes, this will be my second time watching this movie, but now with a more critical eye for the purpose of this review. So now that we're entering the Topus Terranus, will this be Frankelda's finest story yet? Or is this whole movie an entire nightmare? Let's find out. The story. When you have a movie about a writer and make storytelling one of your main themes, the story itself should be as compelling as the protagonist's ability to create tales. As Francisca struggles to become a real writer in her world, it turns out that her talent is needed in the realm of nightmares that she's been coincidentally writing about called Topus Terranus, since that dimension was starting to crumble due to the lack of their main resource, the fear from humans. With the help of the realm's prince, Hernival, she becomes a terror and changes her name to Frankelda so that she could save Topus Terranus by becoming the next royal nightmare maker. But before she takes on the position, they'll both have to confront the old nightmare maker, Procustes, whose skills have been diminishing, and plots to overthrow the kingdom with the help of the realm's clan leaders.
The Royal Nightmare Maker creates him. We all depend on his talent, but he's too outdated now.
This is the kind of feature where the world building plays a significant role to the narrative, and it is a key factor to what makes this very engaging from start to finish. The film was able to develop an entire dimension that is about nightmares and how they function both in their world and ours. On top of presenting how they are made and how they cross dimensions to appear in people's dreams, it also explains how nightmares keep Topus Terranus alive and the way of life that goes in the realm, including highlighting some of its culture, history, and even some politics with the different views of how nightmares and worlds should be run.
What we need is to trust our majesties. This realm wouldn't even exist without them.
In a way, it does share some similarities to Monsters, Inc. with the Pixar film's use of screams as its fuel and having its own world of monsters, but the Ambriz brothers were easily able to make this concept their own, where part of the fun with experiencing I Am Frankelda is discovering this new realm and all the different characters within to learn why nightmares are viewed as something important to them.
And by doing so, you will shape the human subconscious. That is our gift.
But the secret ingredient to what ties the world building so well with the plot itself is the theme of telling stories. As much as it prominently displays its own definition of nightmares, the movie is also a love letter to storytelling and the power they can have to inspire people, as presented by Frankelda's skills being the feature's most powerful tool. It's what helped her escape her dark reality and become her true self. It's what made her unknowingly be familiar with Topus Terranus and its inhabitants before visiting it, and it's her weapon that she can use to both save the realm and stop foes like Procustes. Throughout the film, Frankelda has an arc where she learns that her writing can be put at its best when she is more confident as a writer. And the more she believes that she has great talent, the more she has control over it so that it can be used beyond just telling stories.
Sometimes I hate my reality, but I understand that fiction wouldn't exist without it.
However, much like the status of Topus Torrentis, there are some parts of the story itself where it's not in the best shape. One thing that it does to spice up the plot is adding a bit of romance between Frankelda and Hernival. And I do understand the purpose to include some drama and conflict to the situation to make the girl's visit to the Nightmare Realm more complex. And yet, I don't find it to be the best handled when her emotions make the love go too quickly and all over the place. I'll even say now that one of the film's biggest flaws is how Frankelda can be quite gullible regarding what she is told about Hernival and her writing. Seriously, even when they tell her in front of her face that Procustes is a jealous has-been, she'll believe whatever she's told at the moment and go all in with it.
How could you do this?
Frankelda, that's not what...
But Your Highness, we discussed this yesterday.
While the script may not be entirely excellent due to the romance being weirdly handled, the problems are relatively minor when you still get to have this very rich world of nightmares and a plot that presents the power of telling stories. It honors both writing and being a creative in general by presenting new realms that can escape our reality and find better purpose so that we can discover who we truly are. That's why I'll be giving the story an 8 out of 10. There are times when the writing could have used some revisions, but Frankelda was still able to deliver a solid story. The animation. Maybe you're not familiar with the Ambrose brothers prior to this, but there is one name that I'm sure you'll recognize who actually played a role in crafting I Am Frankelda, and that's Guillermo del Toro, who was Roy and Arturo's mentor throughout the production to make sure that the feature can be at its best shape. I bring this up now because the most noticeable element where you can find Del Toro's influence in the movie is the animation. The way that Topus Torrentis and all the creatures within are visually presented is reminiscent to what Del Toro did with the worlds in his movies like Pan's Labyrinth and the Afterlife in his version of Pinocchio. On the surface, it may look scary with all the monsters roaming around and make their lives revolve around creating nightmares. However, the movie presents its dark, macabre nature as enchanting and whimsical, where the world is more inviting and colorful to make it feel like it's the place where Frankelda belongs and where she can put her writing talent to best use. A big part of the movie's immersion is when it explores around Topus Torrentis and all of its supernatural components. It's also worth noting that the real world in 19th century Mexico provides a cool contrast, where the colors are more subdued and some people are like the human versions of the ones found in Topus Torrentis, giving out that Wizard of Oz vibe to find the inspirations of Frankelda's dream world.
I would never waste my precious time reading this piece of trash!
But what makes I Am Frankelda's animation so admirable is the designs. Rather it be with the sets or its cast, the movie's strongest visual asset is how it brings to life all of its imaginative concepts to create the realm of nightmares. The kingdom itself has a gothic tone that can be decorated with monster-like features to emphasize its theme of surrealistic nightmares, and the sheer volume of different creatures within alone is remarkable. Regardless if they play a prominent role or are just an extra, each character has a very unique look with their own style of movements and structure, which also helps to give the feature that element of surprise where you never know who you'll come across next. And when you consider how this is a stop-motion film, there are some that can be crazy to think about the craftsmanship for both building the puppets and animating them. A great example of this is Procustes. With his large spider legs and his ridiculous amount of eyes and fingers, the work put into him so that he could be a more visually unique villain is crazy, but in the best way possible.
Our kind grows weaker, its strength, its vigor, its presence, all slipping away because of the human scum.
Even beyond the cast, there are times when the film would go extra to add some magic to the realm or intensify the mood with some standout moments, including the action scenes, although they mostly appear during the third act, and the effects that surround Topus Torrentis, like all the clouds with waving hands, Frankelda's ghostly glow, or that one scene where a guy literally melted away.
No, please don't! We will all slowly fade away!
But speaking of the craftsmanship, that is one criticism that I give to the animation. I'll say now that this could technically count as a nitpick, but it's still worth mentioning. As a stop-motion feature, it's noticeable how this was made by a small team working with a smaller budget compared to the ones made by studios like Del Toro's Pinocchio and the films of Aardman and Laika. I'd even say that it has this homemade feel where the flow of the movements isn't as smooth, or it's easy to tell what materials they use to fabricate the sets and the puppets. I understand that the team could only work with the materials they had at the time, but there might be some who will be put off by the animation quality not being on par compared to some of the other animated films on Netflix.
But, well, it's important as you're just starting that you don't let delusions of grandeur get the better of you.
But again, this is just a small problem compared to all of the work put into the picture. And if I'm gonna be honest, when it comes to Mexican-style animation, I'll be more than happy to take something like this compared to filthy AI slop. Seriously, who would be stupid enough to sell themselves out to that expired tech?
And you'll see that I am not to blame for this most embarrassing situation.
But it's worth mentioning that the movie is not entirely stop motion. There are a few scenes, especially during the musical moments, where it mixes up mediums to keep it visually interesting, such as some live action shots to make some metaphors and close-ups on the written pages, and paintings to make some 2D animation. It's rare that you see a movie do that, but when they do, they are always amazing.
He has betrayed us all, and our kingdom will tear apart.
It may not look like the most professionally crafted stop-motion feature, but it more than makes up for it with its incredible designs that present the wonder of Topus Torrentis from seeing the big picture to looking closely at the small details. Top that with surprises to show more of the animation team's capabilities, and you have one of the most imaginative animated movies that even the ones in Hollywood would have a hard time to get on that creative level. While I won't call this perfect animation, I will be giving this another 8 out of 10. Even with the limited materials they had, the team were able to make nightmares look like a dream. The characters. The biggest surprise for me when the movie was globally distributed on Netflix was that it also came with an English dub, which made me excited to see that it's more accessible so that it could reach an even wider audience. And then I watched it.
Frankelda! I underestimated Percustes. Forgive me. I'll fix it. I'm such a fool.
And I don't think Frankelda could come up with a nightmare like that.
No!
But seriously, when it comes to the English dub, it is, at best, a mixed bag. Listen, I can speak from experience that voice acting in dubs is a whole challenge in itself where you have to multitask to deliver your performance. But there are some that I can hear who should have used a bit more training before going in front of the mic. There are those that did well like Frankelda, which helps that her original Spanish voice, Mireia Mendoza, reprised her role in English. But then there are others like Hernival and Procustes whose acting sound more fitting in a parody of a soap opera. I won't be taking points off of this because this is a Mexican movie that is crafted for the characters to speak in Spanish, but if you want to make the most out of watching I Am Frankelda, the English dub is not it.
I want to bring in another writer. A human.
That's blasphemy! That's nonsense!
But going back to the characters themselves, regardless of what language they speak, their personalities do help to show how the film views nightmares and stories, as well as what they mean to them so that they could build layers to their traits. but they also have some quirks that could cause problems to their own situations. And starting off this nightmare roster is the writer herself, Frankelda. Ever since she was little and was called Francisca, she always wanted to write horror stories and create tales about the monsters of Topus Torrentis without knowing that they do exist in another realm, especially as a way to escape her melancholy life. By the time she became an adult and traveled to the other dimension, that's when she gets her first true taste of being wanted as a writer, but even when she's about to have her dream job, her self-doubt keeps creeping in to tell her that this may be too good to be true.
I really want to trust in you, but can I?
But as I stated before, her low self-esteem is not just her biggest obstacle, it's also one of the movie's biggest issues where her doubt can make her dumb. There are times when she can believe in whatever she's told immediately and responds by letting out all of her emotions as if she regrets all of her life decisions. I don't think she is a bad character. I believe she is written well with a good arc about her confidence as a writer, but she can be a reactionary where she acts before she thinks.
Isn't Prince Hurnival the one desperate to get your stories by any means necessary?
Yes!
And the man who turned Frankelda into a terror is Hurnival, the Prince of Topus Torrentis who is looking for a new nightmare maker to save his realm. He does have what it takes to be a good love interest and the next potential ruler of his realm by looking out for what's best for his people and especially his parents, King Victoro and Queen Veritena. Unfortunately, with the way that the romance was handled in the film, his role didn't come out as strong to let out his personality's true potential. Again, great character, but just like his kingdom, he's just not in the best circumstances.
The time has come for you to make the decisions for the Topus Torrentis.
This is garbage!
And then there's Procustes, the evil nightmare maker of the film who wants to take matters into his own hands to revive Topus Torrentis by taking over not just the realm, but also overthrow the entire human world with the aid of the clan leaders who represent their own version of terror.
Those humans will finally get what they deserve. Well, did you hear that?
I do understand how he is a villain and that his motives tie in with the origins of the realm, which is cool to help enrich the world building's history, but as an antagonist, he's about as good as his writing.
This is pure gold, of course. So simple-minded. Oh, I told you earlier, this is not how writing works.
Which kinda sucks. As a whole, Procustes is the typical evil advisor who is supposed to aid the royal family, but has his secret agenda and manipulates his way to become the new ruler. At least with Frankelda and Hurnival, even with their flaws, there are some components to them that make their characters interesting. The problem with Procustes, on the other hand, is that his role is a cliché. Even with his awesome design, he's definitely more style over substance.
He had gone down in history as the most mediocre terror of all.
There are several other characters throughout the feature who have smaller parts like the loyal friend Seimut, the captain of the guards Mythilidas, and Frankelda's cruel grandmother Totolina. There may not be much to discuss about them, but their roles are impactful enough to feel significant to the story with their personal touch.
I know he's been by your side for an entire era, but have you considered getting rid of him?
I wouldn't consider this the strongest cast of characters, since they can have their fair share of unique issues. However, their flaws can be forgivable when they still have more good to offer to the adventure and to the world building, where part of the wonder is getting to know the terrors, rather it be with their personalities or supernatural abilities that enhance the nightmares. Even without considering the English dub, I consider the cast to be the weakest element of the feature. But that's not to say that they're bad. And to prove this, I'm giving the characters a 7 out of 10. There could have been better ways to handle the terrors, but they still came out decent enough to present how a girl became a spectral writer. The songs. Among all the great things that Am Frankelda delivers, what I consider to be the movie's best element is the music. The film is more of an operatic musical that knows how to put on show-stopping numbers that really elevate the picture to a whole new level. Even the score by Kevin Smithers reflects this well to highlight that the film's tone is more reminiscent of a romantic fantasy.
Hi, old friend.
But when it comes to the songs, they are easily the most memorable scenes of the picture that strengthens both the personalities and the world building of Topaz Torrentis. First, there is Fiction and Truth, Two Sides of You, where the king and queen teach the young Hurnival about how the dreams and nightmares they create are a part of who they are. Then there's Invisible Ink, the theme song of Frankelda's Book of Spooks that is cleverly used in the feature to mention the power of literature. After that, it's I've Been in This Place Before, Frankelda and Hurnival's duet where she enters the Topaz Torrentis as the place that she's always written about, but now is filled with wonder as she gets to enter in that world. And finally, there is The Prince of the Realm of Terrors, the film's ultimate 6-minute musical number featuring all the characters coming together to sing as Procustes and the clan leaders take over the kingdom. With the combination of the characters having their unique moment in the song, the heavy tone that reflects how each characters view Hurnival, and the strong use of the painting animation, I am serious when I say that as a Netflix movie, this is the best animated musical number on the platform yet. Even better than the ones in Vivo, Del Toro's Pinocchio, and K-pop Demon Hunters. This song alone is why this movie is worth seeing.
He has betrayed us, all is going to destroy our kind.
And if you watch the English dub, yes, the songs are also in English, and while I find the lyrics aren't as strong when translated, it's not as much of a detriment as the dialogue, especially when the cast are more singers than they are actors. The only criticism I can give here is that I don't feel like there are enough songs here. They're so good that I wish there were more included beyond the 3 songs and the theme to the series. Still though, the ones we did end up getting are phenomenal as is, and that's why I'm giving the songs a 9 out of 10. As much as Frankelda knows how to write stories, it's also important to mention her musical talent. If you're a fan of my videos, then you already knew that this was going to be a positive review. In fact, I already placed this movie among my top 5 best animated films of 2025 alongside Zootopia 2 and Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul. It's not my first time saying this, but this is the biggest way for me to say that this movie is fantastic. I Am Frankelda is a beautiful animated feature that celebrates the power of storytelling by presenting itself as a magically dark musical. There can be some things that have their own issues, like the clumsily handled romance, a tiresome cliche or two, and maybe not the most professionally built animation, but all those problems are forgettably small compared to the strengths that it delivers, like its captivating theme of storytelling, rich world building, awe-inspiring designs, a charming cast of characters, and unforgettable musical numbers. Of course, I consider this movie a must-watch, especially if you're a fan of musicals, but like I said before, I highly recommend the Spanish dub to get the best experience out of it. But if you can only do the English dub, that's fine as well. It's not my preferred version to see it, but it's not bad enough to take away from the quality that's already featured. And if this story about my thoughts on the movie enchanted you, then give this a like and come subscribe to my channel. You can also join my Patreon to support my work and get rewards that will feel like the good kind of nightmares that Frankelda writes. Mexico is not often recognized for its animation, but I Am Frankelda is a great example of what the people in the country can do with the medium. And just like with Frankelda's Dark Tales, I look forward to see what the next animated realm that Mexico will bring us to.
The Prince of the Realm of Terrors.